Emotional content is filmed on Whadjuk Noongar land. This podcast acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of country. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Come for the stories, stay for the connection. I'm your host, Amy Jane Brand, and this is your weekly dose of emotional content. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to another episode of Emotional Content. I hope you are all having a great start to your week. Today's episode is all about the music industry and me becoming a female DJ. And it still feels weird having to say female in front of it, but that is how I was labelled and how every other woman coming into the industry being a DJ is labelled as well. We always have to have female slapped on the front of it. It feels sexist as fuck, but that's just how it seems to be. Today's episode is one that I thought I was going to wait to talk about until a little bit later. But because this subject is so long, I think I'm going to split it across a few episodes spread out. There is so much that I have to say about the music industry and being a female DJ coming into it the way that I did. I had a very different experience to a lot of people. It wasn't the normal way of doing it, and it wasn't initially the most respected either. So I had quite a fight on my hands. I'm obviously not a touring artist. I'm not a DJ anymore. But once upon a time, I was a bikini model turned female DJ that was headlining heavy bass shows across Australia, with some international shows in there as well. And what you won't know is that it all started in a DV relationship, one that continually reminded me that I would never amount to anything when it came to the music industry. This episode is all about how I broke into the most male-dominated genre in the music industry, not because anyone opened a door for me, but because I pushed them open myself. Gaining respect in this space, as you can imagine, wasn't easy. I had to fight for it really hard. And that's exactly what I take issue with. From being laughed at by a huge male artist in this country, to being rejected by agencies because of an ex-DJ that I dated, and to driving my newly purchased second-hand decks across the country in a hired Toyota Corolla that looked like it was about to blow up. This is a story about how I became a DJ my way. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. So I'm going to take you back to the beginning. I was still in Perth at this point. I'm 20 years old and I have just got out of my really long-term relationship with my first long-term boyfriend who I built a house with. And then I got into a very scary, short-lived, but scary DV relationship. I will not be going into the details about that today, but I do touch on it because he was a DJ. And that lifestyle, music, my love and passion for music in general is what drew me into that relationship. And that is actually where I first learned to mix. I wasn't very good at it at that point. I didn't get that much time to learn because this person was extremely aggressive. And he spent a good amount of time reminding me that I would never amount to anything in the music industry and to not even bother. I loved being on the decks. I loved learning. It was something I found so much passion in immediately. It ignited a fire in me and it's something that I just dreamt of doing. I always wanted to do it. I wasn't sure how to start. And honestly, him telling me that it would never happen just made me want to do it more. I'm never going to thank that person for a literal thing. There's not one good thing that piece of shit did. I learned better skill with mixing past that relationship, but that is where it all began for me. Constantly being told that it wouldn't work anytime I gave it a go just made me want to do it more. So people don't know, but that's where it initially started for me and that's where my interest began. When I left that relationship and moved interstate to the East Coast, I was freshly in the Goldie, absolutely loving life, loving the change of scenery. And as I have touched on before, I met another DJ. I can't deny it's definitely giving groupie vibes, but whatever, I can't change it now. I would never date another musician again though, however, ever. I'm sworn off of them. Back when I was younger, I was always going to every single pendulum show that came around. I was at every festival. Chasing status was a huge love for me as well. Drum and bass music was where it all started for me. And then it slowly progressed into dubstep, trap. Trap got really big over in America too. So I always resonated with heavy music. I mean, I did a lot of drugs when I was younger as well, and that's the place to do it. So I was waking up and listening to drum and bass first thing in the morning, going to the gym. So I have always been a bit of a bass head. This boyfriend at the time taught me more about mixing, and I picked up the skill quite quickly. It was obviously a safer environment for me to learn in. I know you can go to schools for DJing now, but I never did that. It was always through boys that I dated and teaching myself stuff online, YouTube, things like that. So it was really home taught is what I would say for myself. During that time, I was really refining my skills, but still focusing more on social media. At this point, I was still heavily focused on bikini modeling. I wasn't at the point where I was ready to start focusing 100% on music. So it was still something that I was just doing on the side and not really telling people about. After living in the Goldie, I was then living in Sydney with that DJ, and I had met so many people in the music industry. Every single weekend we were out with different people, a lot of the Melbourne crew, Adelaide DJs, everyone that had shows we were hanging out with. We were all in these apartments in Waterloo. There's like a whole bunch of apartment buildings there, and so many of the music industry were like living in these apartments at the time. So it was pretty fun. I was also living with my boyfriend's manager at the time. So every single thing that we were doing was living, breathing, eating, shitting music. So I made a lot of friends. I made a lot of connections. I also got pretty chummy with the agencies as well. Back then, I spent quite a bit of time at the Ministry of Sound office, and the agency was called Soapbox Artists. Pretty damn sure that that does not exist anymore. But back then, that was like the bee's knees of agencies that you could be with. So that's just to give you a picture of the kind of environment, the friends, the industry, what I was doing, spending my time, getting to know everybody pretty well, which was essentially a pretty good foot in the door for me in the future. However, not everybody is the nicest in that industry. As you can imagine, like any industry, there's always somebody that has something not very nice to say. I'll never forget when I was at a festival with my boyfriend and a bunch of his friends. You know, we were hanging out with all the Melbourne Bounce crew. So it was like Timmy Trumpet and Will Sparks and a bunch of other smaller artists. And I remember sitting at the table with everybody, we're all drinking, and I said, I would really love to be a heavy bass DJ. That's the type of music that I love. And I will never forget being shut down by Will Sparks, who laughed at me and said that heavy bass music will never be big enough. Granted, Melbourne Bounce music was really picking up then, and I think he was a bit delusional. Melbourne Bounce was taking over. He was the king of it, and he thought that it was just going to be the shit that everybody listened to for the rest of our lives. And quite frankly, I didn't even like Melbourne Bounce music. It sounded really immature to me. I just didn't like it. But I wasn't going to say that at the time. I felt quite embarrassed when he said that. It was very cutting, and it shut me down there and then. I feel like the reaction would have been different if it was a man who said that at the table, but because it was me, a female, and I wanted to do something different other than Melbourne fucking Bounce, I got shut down for it. But it's funny, we're in 2025 and I'm pretty damn sure that Melbourne Bounce is dead now, so that's a shame. It's interesting to see which one outlived what. There's just something not nice about being shut down by, you know, somebody who's well respected at that time, and they just shut down your idea in front of a bunch of other men. Yeah, wasn't the best feeling. Didn't forget it ever. And the day that I realised that Melbourne Bounce music was starting to die off, it's what I thought about immediately. Drum and bass has been around for so fucking long, and to have the nutsack to turn around and say that it was never going to get big enough is just delusional. Like, you're fucking delulu, but you know, who's laughing now? When I ended things with that DJ, I ended up moving myself over to Brisbane. But before I did that, I purchased a set of secondhand decks. I got 2 CDJs and a mixer. It was really fucking heavy. And when I was moving, I picked that up in a hired Toyota Corolla sedan. I'm pretty sure it's a sedan, Corolla, whatever. I picked them up in my Toyota Corolla, full of my stuff, like chock-a-block full of all of my shit. moving interstate, literally driving from Sydney to Brisbane. As soon as I put the decks in the back, it like made the car even heavier. And honestly, it looked like the car was so far down. It was like sitting directly on top of the wheels. I was very, very nervous driving, but I made it. And I was so, so happy that I got a set of my own decks to call mine. Nobody could take them off of me, and I could practice as much as I wanted to whenever I wanted. It was the best, most freeing feeling in the world. Got myself to Brisbane, settled down there, and unfortunately ended up getting in another relationship with another musician. Yes, you guys understand my dating history now. It's giving idiot. And this is where I started taking my practice with DJing very seriously. I was mixing every day. I really made this a priority for me to sharpen my craft, start building a set, making mixes to go online, started recording myself mixing and posting that online, and just really starting to get my name out there for what I wanted to be doing. By the time I felt ready to play a show, I started approaching some agencies about it. And I had some kickback initially, which was interesting. When I mentioned Ministry of Sound and Soapbox artists before, that was obviously a place that I went to first. I spent quite a bit of time there. I was with them on the weekends, touring different shows, yada, yada. And when I did approach them about this, because I had ended things with the previous guy, they decided to pick sides and tell me no, which personally I think is absolutely pathetic. The fact that my ex would have gotten in their ear or they just chose sides without needing to is so unprofessional. Not that I needed them anyway, but it was just a big fuck you. And despite being quite aware as to why I ended things in that relationship, seeing as he was a raging alcoholic, was pretty unfair to immediately pick sides and not give me any sort of support at all. But, you know, men like to choose other men. This is a big boys club that I was trying to step into. What did I expect, really? What did I actually expect? But they can absolutely suck my ass. While I was searching for the right agency to sign up with, I just focused on building momentum online, putting out some really cool mixes. Some of them are still up there if you look up Bout That Bass, so you can get a real understanding of just how heavy I used to play. It's not everybody's cup of tea. However, it is really good if you're doing a hectic gym workout, like a circuit or something. My old gym that I used to go to played it all the time, which was very sweet. Actually, I'm going to go look at my SoundCloud after this to see how they're going, because it's literally been so long now. But they were very popular, and good old SoundCloud was always the place to go for like new interesting music. After putting in the work and a lot of meetings, I ended up signing with New World artists who are based in Melbourne, I'm pretty sure. I probably should have checked that before saying, but I was with New World artists and I was their first female solo DJ, which was a really good feeling. They were an amazing team to work with. However, their roster consists more of singers and live acts. I'm pretty sure they've got Silverchair, Sneaky Sound System. They've got Mallrat, who's a beautiful singer that I've been a fan of for years. So that's more the type of artists that they look after rather than solo DJs, especially ones that weren't producing music, because I wasn't producing music at that time. And I've also got a big story to tell on that too, but that will be in the second part of me talking about the music industry, because there is just so much detail to go into about that. But I was so excited to be on a really established agency. I was finally signed. I was about to book shows. It was a very exciting time, and it felt like a really cool announcement to say that I was the first solo female DJ on their roster. Agencies were hesitant to sign me. Being a model turned DJ or influencer turned DJ was a new thing, and it wasn't the most respected, even though agencies understood that we are capable of pulling a crowd because we had a following. So I was posting mostly half naked photos, and then suddenly I was playing super heavy bass music. Now, this method of going into the industry with a following of some sort has worked previously with bikini models and models in general, but they would always lean into commercial music, not heavy bass music. And heavy bass music is by far the most male-dominated boys club you could ever step your foot into. So it pissed a lot of people off, and it was not an easy choice. I quite literally picked the most difficult genre of music to place myself into, but it was what I loved. And honestly, it was stepping into what felt like my alter ego. And I loved the fact that people did not expect that kind of music out of me. I've always thrived off of being seen as the underdog and proving people wrong. I get a real kick out of that. And this was definitely the biggest hurdle that I ever could have taken on. People talked a lot of shit. They talked shit online. They talked shit behind my back. They were pissed off about it, mostly men. And I can understand why some guys had a bee in their bonnet. I do respect that it would be very frustrating having to deal with a woman coming in with barely any show experience and immediately getting a headline set that, say, someone has been trying to get for years. They're excellent at mixing. It's something they've worked on for a really long time. And then you just get this person come in who gets an immediate headline spot, and not just a headline spot, but headline money. That would piss a lot of people off. I can imagine if you've been working so hard at something and you're not getting the recognition that you feel you deserve, yeah, you'd be pretty pissed off. And the other episode that I'm going to do on this will explain all the different things that those men tried to do to me, because there was so many that tried to sabotage me, but this episode is not about that. To put it lightly, I was stonewalled by people in the industry, by fans of other people in the industry, by other agencies, other professionals. There was so many people that forced me to have to prove myself worthy of being within the bass music boys club. But mostly just this weirdness about it in Australia, because the time that I went to play an international show in Italy, I had all of the American boys support. Like, they were great. Valentino, Grand Theft, Axwell, they were all so lovely with me. Obviously, they were much bigger than me and I was a support act to them. So it wasn't really a threat, but they never gave me the attitude that I had from Aussie artists. And even when I went over to America and I said I was a DJ, there was never the attitudes that Aussie men gave me. They always just thought it was cool and they were super supportive, and honestly were just more than willing to offer any sort of support, which was really lovely and such a different attitude to what I had in the country that I started in. I think the bass music industry back in 2015 was at its peak, hating on influencers or models coming near the boys club. But to be honest, I can imagine not much has changed. I haven't really seen anybody do what I did since I did it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't seen anybody else do it. There's obviously a lot of other female artists in the bass scene, but they started off from being DJs to begin with, and they weren't posting basically their arsehole on the internet like I was before, which pissed so many men off. If you come into the industry without doing that first, they'll respect you a lot more, which is really fucked up to say, but it's actually the truth. If you want to be in the bass scene, you are trying to fight your way through a boys club that you cannot even imagine how tight they are. If you're a female or identify as female and you're coming into the bass scene, prepare yourself to be judged heavily and to have to prove yourself. Bikini pictures or not, they are still so wary of females, in my opinion. It might have changed a little bit, maybe a fraction now. But I definitely feel like the females in the industry that were excellent at mixing, like so excellent at mixing. I saw so many amazing female bass artists that I looked up to, and they were still fighting to get the recognition that they really deserved compared to the boys club. And to be fair, there was ones that were far better at mixing than me, 100%, and they just still weren't getting the recognition that they deserved. And it did piss me off a lot. I felt quite angry being in that industry for a multitude of reasons. I would hope that it has changed more now with that. But as a female in Australia coming into that boys club, you have got a fight on your hands compared to what it would be like if you were a man. And that is the fucking tea. However, one thing that I will say is there was some people that did give female DJs a bad name. I'm not naming names because that's just ridiculous. There's no point in doing that. But there were some female DJs that came in and decided to do pre-recorded mixes, which means they're basically not actually DJing live. It is pre-recorded and they're pretending to DJ. Coming into the industry that way not only tarnished their own reputation, but it fucked it up for a lot of women following. And It gave men this narrative that every single female DJ was pre-mixed, pre-recorded, faking it, whatever they wanted to fucking say. They would always immediately feel that we were not capable of doing something that they were doing. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, DJing is not that fucking hard. It actually is not that hard. Honestly, I feel like most people that can count in their head can figure out how to mix. You might not be excellent at it, but as a whole, mixing is not that difficult. If you want to get into it, you could probably fucking teach yourself. You just have to put the hours into it. However, what sets people apart is their choice of mixing, the speed that they mix at, if they're mixing in key or not. Not everybody does that. You don't have to, but it does make the whole set flow a lot better. So if you learn music, you have more of an understanding of it, you put the hours in, and you're a good performer on stage, because that is a huge part of it. I have seen so many people that are excellent at mixing have really awesome original music, and then you watch them mix and they barely connect with the crowd at all. They're not good performers. They're not great at hyping the crowd up. That is where a lot of people fail. So it's a mixed bag of qualities that you need to be good when it comes to DJing. But when it comes to mixing and learning how to actually do that on some decks, I personally don't think it's that difficult. You put in about, 20 hours of learning it, and I think most people would be able to do it. That's just my opinion. Not everybody's going to agree. But look, it's not like trying to play the violin, okay? That shit is a lot more difficult than playing the decks. I mean, come on. It just is. Okay, so what was my method? Let's break it down, because I'm sure a lot of you, if you're interested in music or if you're interested in what I did to make it work, from becoming a bikini model to a heavy bass respected DJ, you're probably wondering how I did it. First of all, when it came to drum and bass, dubstep, heavy bass music as a whole, trap, putting a little bit of hip hop in there, I was passionate about that genre. I didn't try and go into it because it was starting to pick up or it was trending or it was so surprisingly different to what I looked like online. I did it because I loved it. That was the genre that I wanted. And it also wasn't the genre where you make the most money. Okay. So keep in mind, guys, I was jumping into this because I actually had passion for it. And I had been going to shows. I had been in that scene for years, from like 16 years old. So I was passionate about what I was playing. I didn't jump into it for the money, because if I was going into DJing for the money, I would have picked commercial music 100%. I would have made so much more money going and playing at Ivy nightclub in Sydney, playing commercial music with a bit of house and some hip hop. If I was doing that, I would have made way more money. I chose bass music because I loved it. That was step number one. However, what I will say is DJs that are able to take any sort of request thrown at them are the real DJs. If you can be thrown any genre and throw it in on a smooth transition, you're excellent at DJing. I was always more interested in building a show and an experience. So when I played a headline set, I wasn't taking requests. I came there with a show to perform to people for my 1 hour slot. And that's where I wanted to go down. Probably more because I was around, ex-boyfriends, friends that were all doing that. And that's the type of route that I wanted to go down. So that is where I was going, rather than being someone that can take requests and just, make a setup on the spot. Absolutely not knocking that. Like I said, it takes serious skill to be able to do that. One thing that people did not really know about me back then was I dress like a tomboy most of the time. I'm always in jeans or something baggy. Like, I like to be really comfortable. I've always been quite gender neutral, I would say, or more tomboyish in how I dress outside of social media. As I've gotten older, I've started to become a bit more feminine in what I'm wearing, but my day to day is like jeans and an oversized t-shirt. Like, that is me. So what I decided to do with the DJing was to come in and make sure that I always dressed that way. But I do feel like it's something that I had to do to gain men's respect. If I did dress the way that I did on my Instagram every single day, and then I had to really change myself in order to fit into the bass scene, that would have been a lot more difficult for me to swallow. Whereas this is how I would dress normally, so it was fine for me. But it does piss me off that women have to dress more masculine in order to be accepted into that genre of music. And I don't even know if it's 100% just that genre. I'm sure there's others as well. But when it came to the boys club in the bass scene, I had to cover my tits. Like, I had to cover everything. I'm a curvy girl and I had to make sure all of it was covered. It was oversized tees and usually shorts, but the oversized tee was so big it was covering my bum. So that is how I dressed. And unfortunately, that gained me more respect by covering my body up. And I do hate to say that. However, it was a natural progression for me moving into that scene because that's how I was dressing normally. So it didn't feel like I was changing a big part of myself or having to buy a whole new wardrobe in order to fit into the boys' club. But it always felt a little bit icky that I had to cover up my body in order to be accepted. I never felt good about that. And it did used to piss me off when you'd get dudes playing a boiler room set and they take their shirt off and tuck it into their shorts, but it's fine for them to do that. But I had to make sure that my chest was covered up when I was playing in order to be respected. It's a double standard that's really fucked up. And I know that that lives strong and true today. There's not many female-based artists that are feeling like they can wear whatever they want on stage. More in this country. I feel like in the US and in Europe, it's very different. But the Australian bass music scene is tall poppy syndrome to the fucking max. It's got fierce double standards and it's very sexist. Granted, I met a lot of really good dudes in that industry. And when they came around and realized that I was really serious about the bass music scene and I wasn't faking my sets, their tone changed with me. But at the start, it was a real fight and it really wasn't easy. The reason why I was the first bikini model to do that in this country was purely because I forced every single door open myself and I fought fucking hard mentally and physically to make it work. Basically, men hated me before they even knew me, before they even met me. I had to sit and watch other artists that were literally supporting me at shows talk shit about me on Facebook posts that were promoting the show with my face on the flyer. They were men that were supporting me for that show that were openly talking crap about me, and I had to then go and face them in the green room before I played my set. And that is touching on it very, very lightly as to the type of stuff that happened. It was hard work. It really was. I was actually smoking a cigarette in one of my press shots, which probably wouldn't be so accepted now. But yeah, back then that was something that I openly had as well. So it was definitely more grunge to what was being posted on my social media. I would personally love to see the success of a female DJ in this country within the bass scene that is dressing super girly, tiny tops, super suggestive. It would just be so fun to see that contrast. But I also think it just wouldn't even feel safe. Like it genuinely wouldn't feel safe to dress how you wanted in that scene. Obviously, touching a couple of weeks back about violence rising in this country against women. So I probably wouldn't suggest doing that because you just never know who you could end up working with. But it would be so refreshing to see that in between the boys' club. The first festival that I ever played was in Italy and it was on main stage. I went on at about 5:30. I was supporting Valentino, Grand Theft and Axwell that day on the same stage. And that was the only time that I ever felt comfortable to wear shorts, a crop top and like a full body stocking. So I had like a fishnet stocking all over my body and then I was wearing the shorts and crop top. It looked really cool, but that was probably the most suggestive that I ever wore on stage. But I felt like I could do that in another country. Like it literally felt safer and more accepted there. I was also a lot bigger at that point. I had definitely solidified my name within the industry by then, so it was a bit different. But that was the only time I ever remember wearing something that was a lot smaller than the usual oversized t-shirts. I have a lot of things to tell you about what happened at that festival, even though it was a fucking awesome experience. There was a lot of different things that happened during that tour. I will never forget being interviewed by DJ Mag over there. There was a translator because obviously they were all Italian. And the woman interviewing me was like, "How good does it feel to be the only female that's been booked for this whole weekend? You're the only female playing at this festival. How great is that?" I looked at my tour manager at the time and I looked at her and I was like, not that great, to be honest. Like, it would be awesome to see more females on the lineup. There is so many incredible female artists. It feels kind of weird to be the only female that's playing, to be real with you. And everyone kind of stopped and looked at me like that wasn't a good response, or it was awkward that I said that instead of being like, yay, I'm the only female on this whole lineup. But I felt really disheartened at the same time. I'm like, why am I the only female that's been booked for this whole thing? The year before me, it was Tiger Lily. And the year after me, it was Alice in Wonderland. And I'm thinking, why is there just one each time? Like, this is fucking ridiculous. Anyway, it was just such a bizarre feeling walking away from that interview because I was like, great, they did not love my reaction with that. But at the same time, what I'm saying is so true. And it was a woman that was interviewing me as well. She kind of just looked at me and I'm like, don't you feel the same? Like, how boring that it's just interviewing all these men. Like, fuck, give it some kind of diversity already. This shit is boring. Like, you're only highlighting male artists as being successful by doing that shit. And it's so disheartening. I definitely don't support that. So yeah, that was definitely one of the most weird interviews that I had done. Being a bikini model or having that type of background going into commercial music, it usually will work. It's not so much a boys' club. You won't be as judged within the commercial scene compared to something more underground like the bass scene. I think building relationships within the industry is also really important. If you are listening to this and ever wanted to get started in DJing, in the bass scene, I think going to shows and, showing up as a punter for the music is definitely where you should start to get to know the culture and really understand the people that turn up to these events. Being there to watch other people play and supporting acts is definitely the best place to start, in my opinion. The biggest female artists at the time were Alice in Wonderland, Miha, Rez. Like, they were all heavyweights within that kind of genre of music. They were at the top of their game, but they never started from the same background as me. So if you're stepping into it without the history that I had, it was definitely a lot more accepted. But those women were all still dressing exactly the same way as what I was. So they were the ones that I was looking up to at the time. A lot of female artists were looking up to them at the time. And they really kind of set the standard for getting past the boys' club and being respected within that scene. All three really incredible artists that I still love to this day. I'm going to tell you about my first ever show because your first show is always one that you remember regardless. I was headlining at a club in Brisbane. All my friends came down. I was so excited and extremely fucking nervous. I remember being back in the green room with my mates, all drinking out of my rider. When you get booked as a headline act, you get a rider. And I can guarantee you my rider was not very fussy. A lot of artists can write down the most ridiculous things that they expect in their rider. And the bigger you are, the more ridiculous you can be about it. But I always just had 2 bottles of Belvedere vodka, which is still my favourite vodka today, some cloudy apple juice as a mixer, Red Bulls, lemonade, soda water and lime with a value pack of strawberry chewing gum and a couple of towels for afterwards. So if I was really sweaty, I could use the towel when I get off stage. So that was my rider the entire time I was DJing. I didn't really venture out of that. And I was never really eating before performing because I was usually relatively nervous until I had my double shot vodka on the rocks with a squeeze of lime. That was what I had before I went on stage at every single show. It quite literally became part of my pre-show standard. I had to do that every single time. It just took the nerves off slightly, especially with how much I would get on the mic. Anyway, we get to my first show. I'm about to play. I get on stage. I'm sweating. I'm nervous, but there was a really good crowd. Once I got into it, it was awesome. Headbanging. I actually got told that I needed to stop playing so heavy mid-set because the crowd was holding onto this acrylic railing between me and the dance floor, and they had actually split it because they were going so hard. So, I mean, for me, I was like, that's fucking awesome. But for the club, they weren't overly impressed. Sometimes if you play too heavy, you get in trouble. So I got in trouble a couple of times throughout my career for that. However, it was almost always worth it because the footage that you would get afterwards was so awesome. And watching people just go off was like the best. It's something that I really do miss now about DJing. I think about it quite a lot. That was 100% my favourite part. However, of course, I did run into some dramas from my first show onwards. And yeah, there's a lot of stories I have to tell you about shows, but this is something that would happen very frequently. I had 2 guys standing at the front of me. They did tend to get pushed around a bit by people, on the railing and having a good time, but they made sure to stand in front of me with their arms crossed, talking between each other, staring and watching my hands and the equipment to see whether I was pre-recorded or I was basically faking it. They were there for, I'd say, about 40 minutes of my 60-minute set, just quite literally staring at every single thing I was doing. It does throw you off a lot. Like, honestly, it's not the best feeling being heavily judged. And then I had another girl that was standing there staring at me the entire time because she was obsessed with my ex-boyfriend. And I had told him to please stop speaking to this girl. And she decided to turn up to my set and quite literally stand there staring at me from the side of the dance floor the entire time. It was so fucking creepy. I actually asked them to get her to leave because I was just so like over it. I'm like, why is this girl turning up when I'm literally trying to work, just death staring me the entire time with nobody else, just on her own? It was fucked. And when I was playing shows like that, I did actually feel quite vulnerable because I'm stuck performing for an hour. And if somebody wants to fuck with you, you're basically a sitting duck. It's a public space. All they have to do is pay entry and they have access to you. So it's not something that people really think about, but there has been instances where artists have been hurt or attacked purely based on the fact that, yeah, you're in a public space, it's being advertised, and if somebody doesn't like you or wants to hurt you, they've then got access to you. And it's not like you've got security guards standing right next to you to stop anything from happening. You usually have to deal with it on your own in that moment. So yeah, it's pretty scary having to perform. You're in your workplace, you've got people that potentially want to hurt you or they want to make your job difficult that night. It's not something that you would initially think about, but it is quite a difficult part of the industry, especially when you are touring by yourself. And I will definitely be touching on a lot of that in regards to safety and things that happened in the next episode talking about this. So with New World Artists, I was booking shows, I was touring, I was having a good time. However, it wasn't really the perfect fit for me. And I really wanted to work with people that knew the bass industry better and was, I guess, a bit more intertwined with that boys club I keep referring back to. To have a well-respected agency in that scene was definitely going to help me for what I wanted to be doing. So the next agency that I signed up with was Kosher Agency. I don't know how many of you listening to this will know these agencies, but this agency no longer exists anymore, and I will tell you why. I was really excited to sign with them. I was their very first female DJ again. A lot of firsts happening within my career, but I was excited to be the first with them, and I was looking to make some real moves within the industry with these guys in my back pocket. However, when I went to sign with this agency, I'm not going to name names. People that are in the music industry will probably know who I'm talking about. If you are listening to this, you'll know the situation I'm referring to. But when I went to go and have an interview before signing with them, I sat down with one of the head guys of that agency, his partner at the time, and I was with my ex. We all met up in Brisbane, sat down to have a chat, got to know each other better. And at the time, I noticed that this guy from Kosher Agency was very controlling of his partner. Every time that she went to say things or just speak, he would like hit her under the table, like stop her from talking or like squeeze her leg because I could see from where I was sitting. And I thought that was really weird. I'm like, why is this guy like silencing his partner when we're just having like a fun chat? It just made no sense to me. And I was really wigged out about it, especially because I had been in a very controlling DV relationship when I was living back in Perth. So I found it quite triggering with the way he would speak to her or shut her down. It was like I could smell it from a mile away, basically. However, I discussed it with my ex at the time and he thought that maybe I was being a little bit over the top. And I was like, okay. It was done so subtly that only someone who had been through that themselves would pick up on it. So I wasn't sure what the situation was. I ended up signing with Kosher. There was more people than just him on the team, obviously, to run that business. But I was working with him more one-on-one when it came to bookings and things like that. And I had built an online kind of connection with his partner. Anyway, she had revealed to me that he had been domestically abusing her and she was trying to get out of that situation. By this point, I had been with Kosher Agency for around 8 to 9 months and I was booking good shows. But when I was told that, I was like, there is no way that I can stick with somebody that is doing that to another woman. I felt so uncomfortable. I was so stressed out. I didn't know what to fucking do about it other than I've got to find a new agency. Hi, my loves. Future AJ here. I just wanted to say, before recording this episode, I made sure to hit up the woman involved in that relationship that was being abused. to go over what she was comfortable with me saying, because she also has a following. So we've decided to make nothing within this episode identifiable that brings it back to her. She was happy for me to talk about what I've said, but I'll be leaving it at that. So if you are wondering why I've kept it so quiet on that end, that is why. But I can safely say that she is happy now. She has completely moved on and she is living her best life. So she is absolutely thriving and I am so happy for her. The word got out, he was formally charged for what he had been doing, and the other people in that agency helped me find a better fit. At the time, they ended up also merging with Audio Packs, and that is who I ended up going with. They knew the bass industry front to back. I got some really great support acts in the bass scene, so I was supporting really big artists and getting my name in front of them as well. Getting in front of the crowds that those guys were pulling in was really great for my name, and it made such a difference being with two guys that were already heavily in that industry. So they were very much the better fit for me. But it just goes to show that you really have no idea what is going on behind closed doors. And I know I say that a lot. With how difficult it was to get into that industry already, to then be signed to somebody that was abusing a woman behind closed doors, and to also only really start getting great shows because I was signed by a man that was respected in that industry. It's all just so telling how much that industry is run by men. After dealing with so many men not wanting me to succeed and then being associated with somebody that was abusing a woman, I just felt so bogged down by the sexism, the double standards, the hate against women, the difficulties women would face in that industry as a whole was just really exhausting after a while. As much as I loved that scene, as much as I loved that music, there was a lot of things that were extremely unfair when it came to being a female in that industry. By the time I was living in America, I came back for a show with the Chainsmokers, and there was an artist that was supporting them that ended up acting extremely aggressively towards one of the other female workers. And at the time of this happening, I was very public about it. So this isn't exactly new, but it's something that I will be discussing in the next episode. Witnessing more aggression towards women in the industry after, dealing with as much as I had already was really off-putting. And it just felt like it was a never-ending fight for respect on all sides within the industry, which I hate to say because I love the music scene. There's so much positivity in it as well. And things have definitely started to change for the better now. But I do believe that the strong sense of boys club within that scene has so much toxic masculinity that something does need to change. And for female workers, not even artists, a touring manager in that industry to feel unsafe because of another male artist in this country, she was from America, was so fucking disappointing. And I felt so embarrassed that that was how Australia was basically greeting her working in this country for the first time. So I will be touching on that eventually. Finding an agency and people that believed in me, getting bookings, playing shows was really just the beginning of the fight I had for myself. After spending years of being around other men in the industry, ex-boyfriends, looking back, it was very different to what my experience was as a solo touring artist. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of other female artists that can agree with me on the things that I have to say. The next time I touch on the music industry, I will be spilling a lot of tea, discussing things from what other artists did to try and sabotage me before shows, the feuds and dramas behind closed doors, the consistent sexist treatment, the kickback that I dealt with from the boys' club and how I won them over in the end, the dangers of touring alone as a female artist, and so many other fucked up things. If you're in a male-dominated industry and you feel like giving up, please don't give up. There is nothing more satisfying than making your mark on an industry that didn't want you based on your gender. I know how unfair it is. I know how discouraging it can be, but you are fighting the good fight and you are paving the way for other women coming after you. Proving people wrong is what kept me going in the end, and every single time someone would doubt me, it would give me more fuel to the fire. So please never stop believing in yourself. If any of these motherfuckers are telling you that you can't do something, you absolutely can do it. Do not let them stop you from reaching to your goals and your dreams. So just remember that. So that is it for me. Thank you for listening. I love you guys. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please give it a share. You never know who might need a little emotional content in their life. For daily feel-good posts, follow @_emotional content on Instagram and TikTok. And don't forget to hit that follow button so you're notified every time a new episode drops. Your support means the absolute world to me.